Suga had been excited all day to go home. Quiet sniffles escaped his throat. Today was just overwhelming. Who would have thought it would end like this? The pain in his side and jaw had turned into a consistent throbbing, and the taste of blood still lingered on his tongue. Pull yourself together. It is just a prank. He repeated that mantra as he slowly made his way out of the car and opened the front door. Koshi, finally, you took for... Oikawa stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening. Suga placed his shoes and bag to the side, almost as if he wasn't aware of the bruises clearly visible on his jaw and neck. Who did this to you? Oikawa's expression turned dark and his voice was suspiciously calm. Toru, Who did it? He was trembling with suppressed rage, and his hands clenched into fists. Tears of anger gathered in his eyes as he scanned the injuries over and over again. Toru? Koshi? What is going on? The concern was evident in his voice as Iwaizumi followed Oikawa to the hallway and froze, just like him upon seeing Sugawara. The silver-haired didn't manage to look up from the ground, too afraid of what he would find. He didn't need to look up to know how Iwa would react. The former ace was just as angry as Oikawa, but other than him, the concern for his boyfriend didn't fuel the desire for vengeance but grounded him. Ko. He took a deep breath. Come inside first. I'll get the first aid kit and then we can cuddle and drink tea if you like. How does that sound? His voice was strained. He wanted to protect him, and if he couldn't do that before, he would now. Iwaizumi would make sure that all his needs were met, and that his injuries were cared for. What are you saying? We need to do something. We need to... Toru, I get it. But first... He pointed at Sugawara. Oikawa's anger flared up at the sight before slowly subsiding as he understood what Iwa meant. The tears decorating Suga's cheeks broke his heart and made him want to destroy the reason for his sorrow, but for now, caring for him was the highest priority. I'm sorry, Suga. Here, Don't be. His voice was meek and strained. The silver-haired failed to stop his body from shaking. He was afraid of the reaction his next words would invoke. He took a deep breath, which sent a burning sensation through his ribs and side. But he bit his tongue to give nothing away. It's a prank. It's a prank. Silence spread through the room. The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Was it even worth it? Considering Yamaguchi knew, hadn't their plan already failed? What? And with that short recap of what happened before, welcome to today's video on Other Words Pretend to Get Beat Up, the what-if version of DaiSugaIwaOi. This so far seems very similar to what happened the first time, but I can assure you, we will get a crazy alternative version today. Prepare for angst, and I hope you will like it. It was foolish to think they wouldn't figure it out, especially since he promised Tadashi to ask Daichi for advice on Hinata's behalf. Hadn't Suga been against this plan from the very beginning? He must have gone crazy. Tears stung in his eyes. When he saw their faces, the utter shock and pain his wounds invoked within them, he couldn't help it. He didn't want them to know. He didn't want it to be true. His vision hazed more and more, but he fought it, the tears as well as the dizziness suddenly invading his mind. If he wanted to make this lie believable, he had to. Part of him acknowledged Iwaizumi saying something. He could hear him, see his lips moving and the anger hardening his eyes, but it seemed far away. The words reached his brain in fragments and incoherent pieces. He failed to make sense of them. Alerted, his eyes narrowed. This wasn't good. What? Even his own voice sounded far out of reach. If he hadn't felt the air leaving his throat, he might not have even recognized it as his. Suga staggered a bit, but it only seemed to worsen the situation. Iwaizumi threw a scorching glare at him before storming off. A loud bang echoed through the flat, making both Suga and Toikawa flinch. It sent a lasting wave of pain through the teacher's head. His hands shot up to his temples, intertwining his fingers with the messy curls of silver hair, his nails digging into his scalp. Suga? A sudden nausea overcame him, and the room started swaying before his eyes. Suga! What are you doing? Get it out! You got us, okay? The anger in his voice mixed with concern. Why was he doing this? It hurt seeing him like this. Why didn't he stop? Why? His teeth clenched as he had to watch Suga, his breathing growing shallow. He wanted to turn around and leave like Hajime. He understood him very well on this, but at the same time it felt as if he was frozen in place, as if invisible strings tied him to the other man. He couldn't leave him like this, but wasn't it just fake? He said it was. Why would he continue after he saw what it did to them? The smaller reached blindly for the wall beside him, but his arm gave out on him as soon as his weight shifted and he collided with the hard surface with a low thud before sliding down to the ground. Koshi! A pair of hands caught him before he could slump over completely and held him up. He carefully leaned his back against the wall while his fingers wandered to his neck and gently cupped his face. Even in his barely conscious state, the pain pierced through the lurking darkness and he hissed as Oikawa touched the bruises on his neck. It was real. It was all very much real. Oikawa gulped, the burning rage returning, making his face feel hot and filling his eyes with tears. Hajime! He screamed, unable to tear his eyes from his boyfriend. His bottom lip started to quiver as he watched Suga fighting to stay lucid helplessly. Who would do this? Why? His hand hesitantly cupped his cheek, and he wiped the tears now falling freely away. The injured leaned into his touch, if to seek for comfort or simply because he hadn't had the strength to hold his head upright anymore on his own. He didn't know. All he knew was that it scared him. The way his eyes opened and closed, the glassy look in them when they did, the way his body threatened to go limp in his arms. Hajime! He needed help. Someone more level-headed than him. Someone who could assess the situation calmly. Someone who knew what to do next. When was Daichi coming home? Didn't Hajime hear him? What was he supposed to do? He bit his tongue until he could taste iron and copper filling his mouth. For a moment, the stinging cleared his head a little, and he forced himself to move. First Suga. He needed to lay him down so that he wouldn't hit his head if he ended up falling, elevating his legs a little to help with the dizziness. With shaking hands, he lifted him into his arms, debating whether to bring him to the couch or the bedroom and deciding on the latter. It was closer to the bathroom, which also meant closer to the first aid kit they kept in the cabinet above the sink. Toru? He placed him carefully on the sheets, taking the pillows and stuffing them under his legs. Good. Talk to me, okay? He pressed his lips together in a desperate attempt to pacify himself. I'm sorry. His voice was shaking. It's alright. Everything is going to be fine. Just talk to me, okay? You have to stay awake no matter what. Just concentrate on that. Suga nodded slowly, his throat tightening as he suppressed a whimper trying to claw its way out. I'm going to get Hajime. He knows first aid better than me. No idea if that was true, just that he didn't trust his own judgment right now. He ran towards the office and almost banged his head against the door as he found it locked. Hajime! He knocked, panic slowly tainting his thoughts and voice. Hajime, please open the door. Please, Koshi, I need your help. He was breathing heavily. There was a suspicious fuzziness at the seams of his vision, and he cursed himself for it. Suga needed him right now. His health was the priority, not him. Hajime, please. The door opened mere seconds after he ran into it. The terror in his voice shook the former ace to his core and got him out of his stupor. Oikawa could still see the tears glistening in his eyes that Iwaizumi tried to hide, and while it stung that he felt the need to hurt in solitude, it was overshadowed by his own relief of not being alone anymore. Toru, hey, it's okay. No, it's not. You have to help him. He so desperately just wanted to fall into Iwaizumi's arms and believe his words, but he had to pull himself together. What happened? Confusion reflected in his eyes. It was a mix of emotions, a storm that threatened to throw them into chaos, but the urgency in Oikawa's voice kept him grounded, stopped him from insisting on his anger and disregarding this as part of the prank, even when he brought up Suga. He lied. The trainer's expression darkened. I know. No, he is hurt. He's hurt for real. Badly. He gasped for air. Before Iwa could answer, a hand grasped around the smallest wrist, and he pulled him down the hall to the bedroom. Inside, he let go in favor of returning to Suga's side. Koshi? The other blinked up at him tiredly, but still, he was awake. His eyes found Hajime's. I'm sorry. Iwaizumi said nothing, just inspected him more closely. The way Aikawa positioned him, the red that was slowly but surely expanding from the collar of his shirt. It dripped from small cuts on his cheek, where the skin burst open, and small cracks on his neck that looked like fingernails had scraped the area, leaving nasty cuts on his collarbone. The silence stretched as Iwaizumi took in the information. We'll need ice, some disinfectant, and bandages. Oikawa nodded, rushing off in the direction of the bathroom. Koshi, I need you to be perfectly honest with me. The other nodded slowly. How bad is it? Do you feel dizzy or nauseous? He pressed his lips together before nodding again. Fuck. Iwaizumi cursed under his breath before gently taking Suga's hand in his, squeezing it reassuringly. We got this. You will be alright. I got everything. Good. Tend to his injuries as best as you can. I'll call an ambulance. All the color drained from the setter's face, but he nodded regardless. Daichi sighed and almost fell asleep in line at the grocery store. Work had been exhausting today. While there had been no shocking or extreme cases, luckily, the people he had to deal with were extraordinary demanding, to put it nicely. Entitled and obnoxious would be more accurate. Still, it didn't stop him from taking a small detour to get snacks for his boyfriends. Oikawa's team qualified for the upcoming season, and he meant to celebrate that to their heart's content. He drove home, groceries in the backseat and optimistic for the evening. His good mood, however, only lasted until a mixture of red and blue light painted the reflections on his car. Immediately, his thoughts strayed back to work, and he straightened his back. Vigilant eyes took in the scene as he parked the car. Before the very apartment building he called his home was a small gathering of an ambulance as well as a police car. It was unsettling, yet his experience kept him from assuming the worst before he had assessed the situation properly. Anything could have happened. The building wasn't exactly small, and chances were high that his boyfriends weren't even involved. Chances were high, yet they felt him. In the distance, he recognized Iwaizumi and Oikawa standing by the entrance to the apartment complex. The setter was pale, and his face was scrunched up in a mixture of anger and worry. He would have scratched his arms or messed up his hair with how nervous he was if it wasn't for the other. Iwaizumi stood almost completely motionless beside him, his jaw clenched and his hand gripping Toro's tightly. He stared at the ambulance opposite to them. It left very little room for speculations when it came to Suga's whereabouts. Daichi gulped. What could have happened for the police to be involved as well? And why wasn't he informed either by his boyfriends or colleagues? His heart beat painfully in his chest as he fought to keep his anxiety at bay. He was petrified by all the possibilities that came to mind. Things he saw and heard about during the short time as a police officer, the horror stories meant to scare rookies. There were a million possibilities when he thought about it, one worse than the other. His feet automatically carried him to his partners, but one of the attending officers stopped him. Excuse me, sir, but... Oh, Sawamura-san. Good that you're here. We tried to inform you when we got the call, but you were already on your way home. What happened? We are still securing the evidence and gathering further information. Kimura-san is currently talking to the paramedics. It didn't help, but Daichi still was glad for the information she was willing to provide. He anxiously waited for details on Suga's condition. She must have noticed his worried glances to the ambulance and was quick to reassure him. Sugawara Koshi is injured, mild head trauma and bruises in the neck and torso area. By the nature of his injuries, they determined it to be an external cause. We treat this as a case of assault and are currently waiting for the victim to confirm this theory. The paramedics determined that the bruises are at least 1 hour old, and with permission from Sugawara-san, we would like to confirm that he still wasn't home at that point with the GPS data of his phone too. She became quiet, looking at him like she was unsure if she should continue or not. You want to confirm that neither Hajime nor Toru caused the injury? Yes, it's necessary to make sure this isn't a case of domestic violence, though I get it. I know it wasn't them, so really I take no offense, and they won't either. I might be new, but I do know that this is necessary to ensure the victim's safety. She nodded. Is there anything you can tell me about Suga's condition? Is he going to be alright? Iwaizumi Hajime was the one that called the ambulance, and they informed us. Apparently, he feels dizzy and nauseous, but shows no worse symptoms. They want to take him to the hospital for further tests and keep him the night at the very least to make sure he has no internal injuries. Daichi nodded slowly, still processing everything. This was supposed to be a fun and relaxed evening. How could everything have changed in just a few minutes? We got the information from a precinct over about a similar case. She gave him an estimating look before checking her notes again. Does the name Kozume Kenma ring a bell? Surprised, Daichi faltered, the worried crease between his brows deepening. Yes, he's a friend. My partner planned to spend the day with him and Hinata Shoyo, a former classmate. She nodded while completing her notes. Have you heard anything from either him or Hinata-san? No, why? How are they involved in this? I'm sorry to tell you, but Kozume-san was the victim in the other case. They suspect domestic violence, but considering this... She threw a swift glance at the ambulance while straightening her back. You said they were out together today? Kenma and Koshi? Yes, at least that was the plan. There's a high chance the cases are connected. We will investigate that further. Hopefully, Sugawara-san will be able to fill the gaps as soon as the paramedics clear him for further questions. Daichi's stomach dropped. All he could do was hope that it was nothing serious, that Suga would be alright. He felt cold sweat running down his spine as he tried in vain to calm himself. What about Hinata? He was there too. Could he be injured as well? She smiled sympathetically. If you give me the address, we'll send an officer to his house and make sure he is alright. Maybe he can even help us find the offender. Daichi gladly complied, silently praying that the younger wasn't involved in whatever happened. While it seemed unlikely, there was still a chance that it had been just Kenma and Suga, since he would have dropped the spiker off first. He anxiously waited next to the police car, his boyfriend still only a few meters away from him, yet it felt like miles. They were being separated until the investigation could present first results, secure all the evidence, and hopefully clear Hajime's and Toru's name. 5 minutes into his conversation with the officer, who currently tried to reach Hinata via phone, Iwaizumi noticed them, but their colleagues stopped him from going over. Aikawa noticed too and threw a scorching glare at her for keeping him from Daichi. Good news and bad news. Which do you want first, Sawamura? He knew Kimura from the academy. They never interacted much, nothing more than polite greetings and brief acknowledgements after being assigned to the same precinct. She was good at her job, but kept to herself. Good. The GPS data confirms your partner's innocence. The evidence is secured, and with the information Sugawara-san provided, we have a first lead. You three are all in the clear now to accompany him to the hospital. it will be the same as Kozumi-san to make further investigations easier in case the two incidents are indeed related. We didn't get to ask him about that anymore. Why? What is the bad news? She hesitated for a second. He turned unresponsive a few minutes ago. The paramedics say he's stable for now, but they need to bring him to the hospital ASAP to figure out the extent of his injuries. Daichi gulped. Thanks for telling me. He sprinted past her, meeting Iwaizumi and Aikawa halfway. Daichi! He pulled him into his arms, but before Daichi could reciprocate the gesture, he was pushed away again. What is going on? They won't tell us anything except that this could have been a case of domestic violence and that's why we can't see Koshi. That's stupid. We would never hurt him. You know that, right? Toru, breathe. Of course he knows that. It's gonna be okay. He tried, squeezing his hand reassuringly, but he was already holding it so tightly that everything more would be painful. However, as soon as he would loosen his grip, they would start trembling again. Hajime is right. It will be fine, and you are not suspects anymore. Then who is? Who did this to Ko? How is he? Will he be okay? What? Toru, it's gonna be alright. He kept his cheek gently, feeling the wet tracks of tears on the soft skin. They'll bring him to the hospital now, and we are allowed to accompany him. The other nodded wordlessly. There was so much more he wanted to know and ask, but he knew now wasn't the time. Daichi knew what he was doing, and Oikawa trusted him, especially when it came to Koshi. Alright. It was shaky and not nearly as convinced as he intended to sound. Hey, it's gonna be okay. He looked at Hajime. The other was quiet. He always got quiet like this, whenever he was hurting or afraid. I promise, I will make this alright. They arrived at the hospital a few minutes after the ambulance, and Oikawa frantically searched the halls for any sign of the teacher as they followed the direction of the nurse. Why did they bring him to this hospital? Wouldn't the one in be much closer to our apartment? They found the room, but it was empty, because Suga was still getting treated. Daichi sighed as he failed to urge Aikawa to take a seat. Kenma is here as well. They suspect the cases are related, and it very much seems like it. Kenma? Why? What happened to him? They don't know yet. From what I heard, he was in no position to talk once they got here. Not physically, just he panicked. They suspected domestic violence at first as well. Kenma denied that, and I honestly can't imagine Koro, Bokuto, or Akashi ever doing something like that. Those Sims? Never. They pamper Kenma every chance they get. A small chuckle escaped Daichi's throat as he nodded. Exactly, but they have to investigate it just in case. Sometimes things are a lot different than how they seem. Not that I think that's the case this time, especially not now after all of this. It's hardly a coincidence that they got injured the same day in the same way. Iwaizumi nodded slowly while Aikawa resumed pacing through the room. So you think Hinata might be too? It made Aikawa falter and his fist clench. He might never admit it, but the setter had taken a liking to the small spiker. Who couldn't? I hope not. I really do. I don't know how he would handle this. Suga and Kenma, this will be a lot for them, but Hinata? I don't want to say he's the least mature, but... well, he is the youngest. Yeah, it's just... he's always so optimistic and upbeat, and I can't imagine him like that. You underestimate him, Daichi. He's tougher than you think, otherwise he would never made it this far in volleyball. This isn't a fucking volleyball court, Kawa. Don't you think I know that? They stared at each other angrily. I know that this is different. I'm painfully aware. I treat injuries all the time, yet when I saw Koji like that, I just froze. I did nothing helpful. I didn't even know what to do, even though these were bruises just like my own. He choked on his words. I'm sorry. I should have done better. No, you did good. You helped him. The tears were falling freely from Todo's face. He couldn't help it. His eyes were glued to the ground. He didn't dare to look at them. He's right. If anyone should apologize, it's me. I ran away. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't even know he was injured. Iwaisumi's nails painfully dug into his flesh as he gulped. He had to force his body to breathe, each gush of air seemingly setting his throat on fire. All his muscles were tense. Daichi looked at him surprised, shocked even. He didn't understand what he meant. Ko tried to play it off as a prank. He tried to hide it. The setter gritted his teeth. I don't know why, but if you wouldn't have collapsed... He gulped, his throat tightening again. I ran away. I was mad at him. Really, really mad. I screamed at him. And now... I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said all these things. None of it. Silent tears were falling from his eyes, and he had to interrupt himself to fight off the sobs building up in his chest. I don't want this. I need him to know that I'm not mad anymore. Not at him. I love him. His body was shaking, and he bit down on his lip hard until small drops of red pooled in the area. Suddenly, two strong arms wrapped themselves around his shoulders as Daichi pulled him into an embrace. Hajime, it's okay. This isn't your fault. He knows that you love him. But even if you two fought, the four of us fight all the time. Well, not all the time, but we are twice as many people as on average in a relationship. We are gonna clash occasionally, and that's normal. And I never once doubt that you still love me, and that I still love you. He's hurt, Daichi. I fought him while he was hurt. You didn't know. It's okay. He will forgive you. I know he will. And he's gonna recover. Everything will be alright. Slowly, he felt the other loosening his stiff posture in his arms. The trainer allowed Daichi to pull him closer and hesitantly cried against his neck. Aikawa watched them, stunned, a sour taste lingering in his mouth. Seeing Hajime like this wasn't just unusual, it was close to unheard of. It wasn't just that that idiot preferred to hurt alone, it was rare in general for him to be this affected. Not that he thought he wouldn't be, considering his boyfriend got beaten up, but still, he wasn't prepared to see him like this. He could never be. It only added to the anger and hatred assembling inside him. He wished death upon whoever did this, and if they would just let him, he would enforce it. Thank you all for watching till the end. I hope you liked it, even though it was intense and angsty, but I still had fun making this. So yeah, tell me in the comments if you think this would be the better timeline from the character's perspective. So is this a good kind of development or not? I'm very curious to hear your opinions. Yeah, I hope you have a wonderful and amazing day, because you're amazing human beings who definitely deserve that. So good luck.